Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emily Spranger. I'm an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I am joined by my colleague, Esther Archange, who is also an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning, and our very own NCU librarian, Marisha Kelly. Today, she will be presenting RefWorks, Learn How to Use It. And I have Esther will be helping facilitate in the chat. A couple of brief reminders. If you do want everyone to see what you are posting in the chat, please make sure you select the drop-down option in there that says everyone. Otherwise, it just goes straight to the panelists. And questions are welcomed. Please post your questions in the Q&A function of the Zoom. And you can have a question in the chat, but we don't want it to get lost. So make sure that you're posting that in the right space in the Zoom platform. There are also subtitles available of this webinar. If you do select the live CC transcript, you can hit the button that says show subtitle and it will transcribe it there at the bottom of the Zoom for you for future reference. As always, this webinar is being recorded and we will post it in our CTL LibGuides webinar page. And I think that about covers it. So I'm going to turn this over to Marisha.
Thanks so much, Emily and Esther. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to share with you all things RefWorks. So this session will actually introduce you to RefWorks. And if you're not familiar with RefWorks, it is NCU Library's research management tool. And we're going to cover a lot in a short hour. Time goes by really fast, but we'll talk about how to create your account, how to add references, and how to create a bibliography using a tool. Just a couple of housekeeping items on my end. I do want you to keep in mind as you're working with this tool that it is a software application. So it will take some time to learn how to use it and leverage its features in a way that makes the most sense for you. So with RefWorks, you are creating your own personal database of resources. So as you're doing research through the NCU library databases, as you're doing research online, you can save all of these things to a collective space, which is your RefWorks dashboard. I also want to mention that if at any point you do experience any issues or difficulty with using or accessing RefWorks, please don't hesitate to reach out to the NCU library first. We actually provide the most support for the tool. And if it's not something that we can help troubleshoot, we can certainly get you in touch with our teammates over in the NCU IT help desk or ProQuest RefWorks support directly. The last thing I'll mention before we dive in is that this session is not necessarily intended to go over APA style, although we will touch on a few points related to APA, right? Because part of the feature and functionality of RefWorks is that you can create an APA formatted reference list. But if you do have specific questions related to APA style and writing guidelines, I'm going to shout out my teammates over in the Academic Success Center. And if you're not familiar with the ASC resources, and hopefully you all can see my screen okay, but if you're not familiar with the ASC resources, if you're logged in through your NCU One course portal, you can click on Resource Centers and access the Academic Success Center resources. And there is a dedicated content for APA style, and you do have access to a tool called Academic Writer. And if you're not familiar with Academic Writer, it does include sample APA paper templates as well as citation examples by resource. So if you needed to know how to cite a book in APA format or how to cite a journal article in APA format, you can essentially refer to the electronic guide that's posted within the tool. Now, there are ways to kind of leverage both the use of Academic Writer and RefWorks together. But one thing I do want you to keep in mind is that RefWorks really is to manage your sources. So where you might have things saved on your desktop, whether you might have things saved in the cloud, in your email, RefWorks is a central repository where you can save all of your articles and annotations related to a resource that you're using using for your dissertation or your research assignment. All right, so that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get logged in to the NCU library. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can access RefWorks through the library's homepage. The easiest way is under How Can I? You do have a link to access RefWorks directly. You can also scroll through our alphabetical list of LibGuides and go down to RefWorks here. And then under A to Z databases, if you're not familiar with that, A to Z is a complete list of all of the databases that you have access to within NCU library. There is a direct link to RefWorks there. So I'll go ahead and get logged into our RefWorks library guide. Now this page exists 24/7, so you can always refer back to the content and tools and resources that are posted on this page. A lot of what we will cover in today's session is outlined in the tabs in the far left here. I do want to point out that there is a link to access the older version of RefWorks called the Legacy RefWorks. All of you should be using the brand new RefWorks, so using this first tab here. This older version is pretty much for students who were grandfathered in. So everyone should be using the new RefWorks. A couple of things I do want to highlight on this page before we get logged into the tool and review a couple of things. On this page, you do have access to additional RefWorks training sessions. So we do offer RefWorks Power Hour every week. So again, we're going to cover a lot of information in a short period. So if you need a refresher, if you'd like to attend another live session, feel free to register. And then we also have a posted recording as well as our workshop outline. So feel free to access that content as you need it. The last thing I'll mention on this page is our RefWorks on-demand appointment service. After you've attended a training or watched the recorded version of our RefWorks tutorial, if you have any questions related to installing some of the respective applications that allow you to use RefWorks, both online and through Microsoft Word, or if you're experiencing any wonky issues with your dashboard, or you'd like to do a walkthrough on how you can, better organize your content, you can certainly book a one-on-one using our RefWorks on-demand support service. And this will kind of take you to our booking calendar with the available dates and times to register. So before we get logged in, I do want to cover how to create your account in RefWorks if you have not already done so. And we'll go through these screens here since I've already done this step myself, but you'll essentially click on the RefWorks sign-in link, and that'll bring you to the NCU1 login page. So you all should be familiar with this page. You'll enter your NCU school email address, your associated password, and then you'll be routed to the RefWorks sign up page where you're going to confirm your NCU school email address, and then you'll be required to fill out your RefWorks profile with your name, your area of focus, your role at the institution, and that's it. You'll have access to your RefWorks dashboard online. Now, for all of my new users, there is a second step that you must follow, and that is to set up an alternate password in RefWorks. Now, this alternate password is what you will use in order to log into the RefWorks application for Microsoft Word. So unfortunately, that app isn't integrated with our NCU login system. So you'll still use your NCU school email address, but you'll log in through the app with that alternate password. So once you log in to RefWorks, you'll actually click on your name in the top right-hand corner. You'll click on settings, and then under settings, you'll scroll to the area that says alternate password. You'll set up that alternate password, and the password requirements are minimal. It just needs to be 6 characters, and then you'll go ahead and hit save, and you'll be ready to rock and roll with the application for Microsoft Word. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to install and use that when we look at creating a bibliography. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle to our RefWorks dashboard. And I'm already logged in, but just so you all know the trajectory for today's session, we're going to break this down into 3 parts. We're going to do a complete walkthrough of all of the different menu items and tabs. Then we'll talk about how to get content into RefWorks, and then we'll end our session with how to create a reference list using the RefWorks Citation Manager tool for Microsoft Word. So as I mentioned earlier, once you get logged in, if you need to set up that alternate password, you'll click on your first and last name in the top right corner and then go to settings. There are additional settings that you can play around with. We do talk about these in our advanced session. So be on the lookout through our library events page and our training calendar for future sessions on that. You also have a language tab. I do want to stress here that this is to change the language of the interface, not to change the language of your references. So unfortunately, it is not a translation tool. So just keep that in mind. You have a link back to the NCU library. And then most importantly, you can see that I'm currently working in a project called dissertation. So for many of you, if it is your first time logging in and using RefWorks, you're going to see that the current project is titled Untitled Project. So in RefWorks, there are actually 3 major ways that you can begin to organize your content, organize your research. And the first level way is through the use of projects. And think of projects as their own instance of RefWorks. So today, you might be working on assignment 1 about a very specific topic that has a specific set of resources. And next week for assignment 2, completely different topic, and it requires a different set of resources. So you can create multiple projects for yourself. If you click on this caret, this little circle icon, you can see that I have other projects in the works. You do have sharing capabilities for projects, so you can share your projects with other RefWorks users or members of the NCU community. We won't go into detail about that today, but know that it is a possibility. But here is your projects manager. So I'm going to go ahead and click into manage projects. And this will show you a list of all of the current projects that I have available and that I have created in my RefWorks. So a lot of different projects. If you'd like to create a brand new project for yourself and start with a clean slate, you can go ahead and create a new project, title that project respectively, and hit save. And then to the right of each project, you'll notice that you have some action items. So you can rename that project. Again, you've got sharing capabilities. You can set something as your current project, and then you can delete a project altogether. Just know that once you delete a project, you cannot recover any of the content that's contained in there. So just be careful if you're deleting a project. So I'll go back into this dissertation project. Since we have a lot of different examples that we can go through. But that pretty much takes care of everything in this top blue navigation. So we're going to swing over here to the left-hand side. And you'll see that the default tab is the All References tab, and All References is just that. It's any reference that you have added to your RefWorks project since the beginning of time. So you can see that we're currently viewing 1 of 50 out of 446 references that I've added. A couple of things I want to make note here is that your access to RefWorks is unlimited. So you can save as many resources and references to the tool as you would like. There is no cap. The only limitation that you have in RefWorks is the file size that you can upload. So just bear in mind that all of your files have to be 20 megabytes or less. If it is more than that, it will fail and it won't save to the system. You have a couple of different display options, so you can display up to 2,000 references per page. Right now, the default is normal view, but I do recommend that you all change your citation view settings in RefWorks using the citation view option and setting that to APA 7th. So if you click on that gear, you can go ahead and do a search for APA 7th. Now, what you'll notice in RefWorks is that there are variations of APA 7th, and this is to pretty much combat against certain formatting issues with different databases and search tools on the web. But the uniform version of APA 7th that you will want to use is this APA 7th sentence casing with the full DOI link, and you can go ahead and hit save. And what's nice about setting your dashboard to citation view settings is that RefWorks will highlight different areas of a reference if you are missing any information. So for example, in this particular reference, I'm missing my authors, and I'm also missing an appropriate website. So one thing to keep in mind as you're going through and adding content, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is that RefWorks is a tool and it is not perfect. So anytime you are adding content to RefWorks, just be mindful that your reference records should be complete and that there should be no missing information, and that the information reflected, just double check it to make sure that it is accurate. If you click on a selected reference, this will bring out this right pane here, which is your reference record. So it contains all of the information related to your particular resource. And at any point in time, you can edit this reference record. So if I was missing an author, I could go ahead and fill out that information. So we'll do last name, comma, first name. I can go ahead and fix the link here, and then you can go ahead and hit save and update. So please know that you can always edit the content in your reference record. I'll mention here as well, there is a notes field in your reference record. So if you wanted to jot down any notes related to a particular reference, maybe if it was peer reviewed, if you had, a direct quote that you used, this is an opportunity for you to keep tabs on why you're including this resource in your RefWorks dashboard. All right, so that's your citation view settings. Again, you'll click on normal view, which is the default. You'll come to citation view. And if you click on that gear, you'll be able to set your citation style output to APA 7 sentence casing with the full DOI. And just to reframe that, what the sentence casing does is that if your titles are in all capital letters, which can happen when you're importing from certain databases, RefWorks will automatically reformat those capitalized, those all cap titles to sentence casing, which is proper APA format in that sense. And then the last thing we have here is we can sort our references by date added, access published. You can sort by title, author, and then reference. Ref ID is actually a unique reference ID that RefWorks assigns to your resources as you save them to the tool. Last imported is just that. It's anything that you have recently imported into RefWorks. So you can see the last time I actually added something was November 11th at exactly 1:08 p.m. This is just a quick access feature, so you can see content that you've added within the last 30 days. After 30 days, you can always access your resources and information using your All References tab or your personal folders. I'm going to go ahead and skip over sharing, but again, you do have sharing capabilities with other RefWorks users and members of the NCU community, but we're going to skip over to folders. Now, again, 3 major ways that you can organize your content in RefWorks. A first level way is through the use of projects, right? And then within your projects, you have personal folders for how you continue to organize your content. Now, you do have this not in folder folder, and this is a persistent folder in RefWorks. It will always be there. It is basically your catch-all for any resources that you haven't specifically filed away into other folders. So know that anytime you save content to the tool, you can always access it from your not in folder folder. And if you'd like to file it away and create a filing structure for yourself, you can begin to add folders. And you can add a folder by clicking on this plus icon, and we'll go ahead and we'll create a folder for ourselves. So let's create one for today's date. So you can see I've added my folder here. Now there are a couple of different ways that you can save items to folders. You can use a drag and drop method. So I can easily drag this record, this reference to my folder. I can select multiple references and drag them to my folder. And I can also select multiple references, and you'll see that this assigned to folder icon becomes blue and active, and we can select which folder we'd like to save those items to. Now, to the right of each folder, you do have some action items as well. So you can add a subfolder, you can rename that folder. Again, you've got sharing capabilities. You also have a find duplicates tool. And this is a cleanup tool that's available both at the folder level and also at the project level under tools and find duplicates. With RefWorks, you do want to ensure that you have a clean and accurate database because that's going to affect how you create or generate that reference list. So make sure that you only have one instance of each resource that you're using throughout the course of your research. So you certainly don't want duplicate content. And then you have the delete option. One thing I will stress here is that deleting a folder does not delete the references in that folder. So if I were to delete my November 16th folder that we just created, essentially these 5 references are going to get cycled back to my general not in folder folder. So I'll go ahead and I'll delete that folder. So you'll see that this number will update from 439. And I may need to refresh here. There we go, to 444. Now, if you do need to delete a reference, let's just say you no longer have a need for that resource, it is no longer part of your project plan to use it, you can delete a reference by selecting that particular reference, and then you have this little trash can icon where you can place that reference in the trash. So that's the second level way that you can organize content in RefWorks. Third level way that you can organize content is through the use of tags. And think of tags as keywords that you apply to your references to make them searchable within your database. Now, tags can either be author supplied or publisher generated, but you can actually add your own tags to a resource. So if you look at a reference record, and we'll use this one as an example, sometimes when you save a resource to RefWorks, there'll be associated tags, but you can also add your own tags. So maybe I want to use this resource in my assignment 3, so I can tag it that way. Maybe I've used this in my literature review, so I can tag it with literature review. Now, one thing to keep in mind with tags is that you want to be consistent with how you apply those keyword terms. Or apply those tags, right? So you can see here I have different versions of literature review as a tag. So please know that spelling counts, capitalization counts, spacing counts. So make sure you stick to a standard naming convention when you're using these tags. So now if I wanted to see everything in my personal database that I have tagged with literature review, we can go ahead and do a search for that tag, and RefWorks will populate a list of all of my resources with that particular tag. And we'll give that a minute to load. So again, 3 major ways that you can organize your content. You have projects, you have folders, and you have tags. So I want to pause for just a second and see if there are any questions before we move to our top menu and go into phase 2 of the workshop.
Absolutely. We have some questions.
Yes.
So first things first, I'm just going to go down the Q&A list. Elizabeth asks, I have noticed that when I've tried using this in the past, I had to manually enter in the DOI, but excuse me, let me start that over again. I have noticed that when I tried using this in the past, I had to manually enter in the DOI, but it was there when I used citation from the library. Did I do something wrong, or is this common?
So the DOI will populate in a particular field if it is available in what we call the metadata of a resource. So when we talk about adding content to RefWorks, sometimes the DOI may not be listed in the record from that database that you're pulling the information from. So there are cases where you will need to manually add the DOI or double check to see if there is a DOI associated with that record. So again, RefWorks is a tool and it kind of helps you aggregate all of your content in a central space and build out your reference list. But you do want to make sure that all of the related information about a resource is contained in that record. And sometimes that means making some manual updates or tweaking that record so that it's accurate. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay. Are reference ID numbers changed when you delete one?
So they are not. So once you delete a reference record, it does not change all of your other IDs. It should stay the same. And the reason is that has a unique ID. So as you're inputting it in your reference list, it's kind of coded based on that ID number. So I hope that answers that question as well.
Well, that's great. We don't want all the other IDs to change just because we delete one. Absolutely. Right. Can you tell me which sentence casing it is supposed to be? There was another question that popped up about that when you mentioned selecting that.
Yes. So I'll drop this link in the chat for everyone. So this actually reviews the different ways that you can set your citation style output to APA 7.
Nice.
And it shows you the appropriate one. So yes, there are a couple of different APA 7 styles in there. So you'll want to use the one that's listed on this guide page. So it should be APA 7 sentence casing and then the full DOI link.
Thank you so much for that. And then I think I'm going to try to do 2 more if we have time for it. Yeah. In a dissertation, would you use folders for lit review topics, methods, etc.? So I think this is a good question. Do you use the folders for that in that way of organizing? What's your suggestion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way I organize my content will be very different from the next person, right? Okay. So RefWorks provides you with the flexibility of creating folders that you see fit, of tagging content you see fit. So I have had users and have worked with users that don't like to use folders, right? They just have everything in their dissertation project. Then I have other users who sort their content by folder, by chapter. So maybe you have a folder for chapter 1, chapter 2, right? And then I have users that prefer to use tags for things that they've used in their literature review. So really, that whole filing structure would be up to you. But if you wanted a folder dedicated to your methodology, if you wanted a folder dedicated to resources about your theoretical framework, maybe you have a folder dedicated solely to seminal works, right? So you have that flexibility there, but you can still review all of your references and resources, using the overarching tab for all references. So I hope that helps a little bit with some perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it shows there's different ways of organizing it, and it is going to be up to the user. But if you lose a resource, where did I put that resource? What folder? You can always go to your all references. Let's see, share folder. Can you share outside of NCU? So if you want to share a folder with someone, how does that work?
So in order for folks to access your RefWorks folders, they do have to have an active RefWorks account. So you can share without, folks outside of NCU, but they would have to have an active RefWorks account, which may require a personal subscription. When we talk about this top nav, but I'll go ahead and do that now, you do have the option to export your references in different types of file formats. So you can download or export your references. So essentially all 400 plus resources that I have saved in this project, I could export it as a tab delimited or an XML file, which is compatible with Excel.
Okay, very good. Someone just popped in the chat. Oh, wait, so the all references will hold it even if you have it in folders.
Yes. So it's kind of like a bird's eye view of everything in your project.
Okay, very good. And then I know I said two more, but
that's okay. There's not that many left, I think, so we can pop through them.
Okay, good. Okay. Can I import a list of references into RefWorks? Can you import?
So that's a great question. Unfortunately, let's just say you had a drafted reference list in Microsoft Word. Unfortunately, you can't add your document and create these separate reference IDs. So there are ways that we can bulk add references through the NCU library or through Google Scholar. But essentially, you'd have to add each reference individually. We can't just upload a Word document containing a list of all of these resources. We can't go back in time, unfortunately.
And Elizabeth, someone's just asking, its main function is purely creating a bibliography. And I think it does do that, but there's more to it than that, right?
Yeah. And again, with RefWorks, you're creating your own personal database of resources. So as opposed to you maybe saving all of your content on your desktop, on flash drives, maybe you've got printouts of things, right? This kind of gives you a central space to hold all of your research resources, and it travels with you. So think of RefWorks as a cloud storage system, right? But it allows you or affords you the ability to annotate your resources, to organize your resources. And then part of the feature too is that you can create a reference list, but it's primarily a storage system of sorts, for saving all of this content that you'll eventually use throughout the course of your research. I should mention as well that you all retain access to your RefWorks accounts as alumni. So all of the content, all of the documents that you're saving from the library, PDFs that you're uploading to the tool will be accessible to you because this is your own personal database of resources. So I hope that provides a little bit of insight that it's just more than creating a reference list. You can really take notes.
That's amazing. And then I think this, and I just wish I had this when I did my master's, but I'll just say on a personal note, but this question I think maybe will potentially be addressed through the sentence casing thing. Even using the right APA style in RefWorks, I get many of the references with a lot of APA errors, such as the wrong capitalization letters or spacing between titles and authors, particularly when using references before 2019. Any tips for adjusting those?
Yeah, so I recommend, instead of fixing the problem when you've generated your reference list, as you're importing content into the tool, make sure that your reference records are accurate, right? Just double check to make sure that there is no missing information. And I think one tip that I strongly encourage you to do is to set your dashboard to citation style output for APA 7. That way you can at least preview what the reference will look like once you generate it in your reference list. So, if I was missing a DOI, if I was, viewing certain authors and maybe their names are in all capital letters, right? And unfortunately, RefWorks does not fix names in capital letters if they export in that way. So we'd have to come back to our reference record, edit that reference record, and make sure that we have title case for our names. So just keep that in mind. So again, we can't rely on the tool entirely. We do have to just cross-check the information to make sure that it is complete and accurate. So I hope that helps.
Can you leave that little, this last question where you can, yes, thank you so much, Marisha.
Yeah.
This last question here in the Q&A, and then we'll move on. So you can open your content and documents from RefWorks then, which if they have the full text, right?
Yeah, so essentially in your RefWorks record, you do have the option to add attachments. So after you save, we're basically with RefWorks saving information about our information. You're saving information about your resource. So you do have the option to upload any attachments. It's not limited to PDFs, so you could save Excel files, Word documents, JPEG images. You can even save videos, right? Because we're treating this as a cloud storage system. Now, if your document is a scannable PDF, you can use the RefWorks Reader, and it will display your document. So here's just an example of a couple of files, and you can save multiple files to a record if you would like. But if it is a scannable PDF, you can actually read the document in the RefWorks viewer, and then you can download the document to print out, or share with others. You also have some other annotation tools, so you can highlight within the text for PDFs that allow for that. And you can also add notes. The only thing I will mention here with highlighting and adding comments or notes to a PDF in RefWorks is that those highlights and those notes exist solely in RefWorks. So unfortunately, I can't print this PDF with my electronic highlights. So just keep that in mind. And I think we chewed through all of the questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to move into phase 2 and 3, or I guess 3 and 4 of our session. So before we do, the last tab that you did have here on the far left is your deleted tab. So if you do delete any references, they'll end up in the trash can. If you accidentally delete a reference, which I've done before, it's nothing to freak out or panic about. You can come to your deleted tab. You can click on the selected reference, and you'll see that there's this undo button that becomes blue and active, and you can restore that reference back to your folders. I believe that content in your deleted tab stays there for 30 days, and after 30 days, things are permanently removed from your RefWorks project. All right, so that takes care of everything on the left-hand navigation. So let's talk about how to get your content into the tool, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these other tabs in the top here. So in RefWorks, there are 5 different ways that you can add content to the tool. 3 of them are listed directly within the interface. And then the other 2 are external methods. So you can actually upload PDF documents. And if RefWorks is able to scan that PDF, it will build out a reference record by pulling out pieces of information like the author, the title, the date, page numbers. The only thing I do caution you with uploading documents to build out your records is that more often than not, you might end up with records that look like this because RefWorks can only read or interpret so much from a file. So you may need to do a little bit of manual labor to add in missing content such as your publication year, journal title, volume, issue, page number. So I don't usually recommend starting with an upload automatically, only because if RefWorks cannot read that file or interpret that file, you'll end up with a record that may be completely blank or missing a lot of fields that need to be entered in manually. You have the import references option. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is pretty much important if you are using a different reference management tool. So something like EndNote, Mendeley, Zotero, and you wanted to transition those references over to RefWorks, we can essentially download a specially formatted file called a RIS file, which stands for Research Information Systems, or a bibtext file. And it's a coded file format that tools like RefWorks can read to save information about your resources. We can also create the reference manually. Not ideal, but you may have, for example, a physical book that you need to get added to your reference list. And I use this example a lot, but let's just say I was adding a physical book, and we can do the 7 habits of highly effective people. And there is this little lightning bolt next to your title. So this is the autocomplete function. So RefWorks will make recommendations for resources that you intend to use. So you can see that my book is highlighted here. I can click on that resource and RefWorks will pre-populate the information for me. But again, you want to double check the record at this stage to make sure that it is accurate and that it is complete. So you can see here, there's this weird character in my title that does not belong, right? My author is written correctly, so that's good. I don't need first edition, that's redundant. I don't need UA here. If I wanted to add any notes or, add any tags, so maybe I want to tag this with some terms related to leadership, maybe management, maybe the type of source it is, a book, and I can go ahead and hit save. And you may have printed documents or articles already. So, you have all of the information about that resource at your fingertips. So it may just be easier to create a record manually if you would like. And you can see if we go to our last imported, I'm starting to see the content that we've added to the tool. Now, the other way that you would be able to add content to the tool, and probably the most popular way, is through the NCU library databases. And most databases do have a direct export option. Basically a magic button that allows you to send information about your resource and save it to the tool. So I'll show you what this looks like in Roadrunner Search, which is that central search box on the library's homepage. Roadrunner searches the majority of the library's databases, resources, and content on a single search platform. So it's really a great place to begin researching a topic. So I've done a quick search here for business management and leadership. And let's just say I wanted to save this particular article to my RefWorks. I can go ahead and click on the title of that resource, and that'll bring me to the record for this resource within Roadrunner Search. But if you go over to your far right under tools, you'll see a couple of different tools here. Most databases do have a cite function. So this allows you to preview the in-text citation directly within the search interface. I can tell you that this one looks to be correct. So we've got sentence casing for our titles, and it does have our DOI. But if I wanted to save this to the RefWorks tool, I'd want to use the export function. And I do see a question in the chat. So how did you get from RefWorks to the library search? So in RefWorks, you do have a direct link to the NCU library by clicking on North Central University. So that'll bring you back to the home page. And from there, you can access the central search box for Roadrunner. So I apologize, I skipped over that step. I already had a search loaded on my page here. So once you click on that article title for that search result, you'll want to hang over here on the right-hand side, click on export. You'll see that direct export to RefWorks is already selected for you, and you can go ahead and hit save. And you'll be brought to this choice screen only because, again, we have the old version, the legacy version of RefWorks, and the new version. You can check this box so that it doesn't consistently ask you to choose between the two. We're all using the new version here. Now, if you have multiple projects in the works like I do, RefWorks will ask you which project are you saving this reference to. So really important, you can only save a single reference to one project at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and save this particular reference to my dissertation project. I'll send it to my not in folder folder. I don't want to file it away into any place in particular. And this is where you can choose to keep the author or publisher supplied tags, or if you want a clean slate for those tags where you're creating your own kind of keyword list associated with your references, you can start with a blank slate by making sure that this is toggled to gray. And we'll go ahead and hit import. So we'll give that a minute to load. So you can see that one document has been saved to my library, and we're kind of kicked back to our last imported tab. Now, a couple of notes about direct export from the library databases. When you save a resource through direct export, I want you to be mindful that it does save a link to where this resource may live within the NCU library. But these find full text using link resolver links can sometimes be problematic. Sometimes linking structures change and those links can break. Sometimes those links route you to the publication level and not the actual article. So it may route you to the full Journal of Management Studies and not this particular article. And then third point is that your access to the library changes once you become an alumni. So these links may no longer work once you're an alum. So that being said, I do recommend that once you save information about your resource to create that reference record in RefWorks, that you take the extra step and add your attachment, attach that document to RefWorks. That way you always have access to the PDF and you always have access to the content, okay? And you would go ahead and hit save. So that's the fourth way that you can add content to the tool. The fifth and last way that you can add content to the tool is using the Save to RefWorks tool. And this tool is actually located in Tools and Tools again. And we'll give that a minute to load. And the Save to RefWorks tool is basically a browser bookmarklet that allows you to scan the bibliographic content of a web page and save that content to RefWorks. So you do have to install this to your browser. So you would come into your tools area, you would click on install Save to RefWorks in your browser toolbar here in your favorites bar, make sure that it is visible, and then you can drag this little icon to that area and you can begin using the tool. We do have more information about the Save to RefWorks tool under our RefWorks writing tools and plugins area. So I'll drop this link into the chat, but there is a short video that shows you how to use that browser bookmarklet. And there are a couple of important notes. So The tool unfortunately does not work with all websites. Some websites, notably those beginning with HTTPS, I've seen this happen with government sites. They don't like their pages to be scanned by third-party applications. So you may need to look to other methods in order to save that content to the tool. And I do see a couple of questions in the chat. So do we have to download the PDF and then upload it to attach it? So that's correct. You would download a local copy of that PDF to your computer, and then you would add it to the reference record. You attach that document. And I'm not sure I understand the second question. How would you add the export to RefWorks as attachment to use or view as PDF? So maybe you can clarify that, and I'm happy to kind of walk through or work through those steps as well. All right, so we're coming down to the wire. So I do want to make sure we talk about how to create a reference list. There's two ways that you can create a reference list once you've added all of your content to the tool. So you can click on create bibliography and create bibliography again. So that allows you to build out your reference record directly through the RefWorks dashboard online. So you can select or cherry pick which references you want included. So if I wanted to create a reference list with these 5 sources, I can select them, and then I can go ahead and click on create bibliography. You'll notice here that this is another place where you can set your citation style output. So again, I've got mine set to APA 7th sentence casing. You can see my reference list here was generated for me. I did do this intentionally. I have tons of duplicates in my dissertation project, only to share with you what can happen. So you can see I have a Covey version A and a Covey version B because that reference is duplicated. So again, make sure you have a clean and accurate database as you're saving content to the tool. But ultimately, it alphabetizes your content. It creates your hanging indents. You can then copy this to your clipboard, and then you can paste it into a Word doc. So that is the first way that you can create a reference list. But I think the way that everyone will prefer is to use the RefWorks Citation Manager tool, which is the plugin that you can install to Microsoft Word in order to access your resources and create your reference directly within the tool. But we first have to install it. Okay, and we're going to do a very quick run through on how to use the tool as well. But to first install RefWorks Citation Manager, you do have to click on your Insert tab. And under your Insert tab in Microsoft Word, you're going to click on Get Add-ins. And once this screen loads, you'll do a search for RefWorks. And you'll see that you have the option to add the RefWorks Citation Manager.
I popped it in the chat, just so you know.
Perfect. Thank you. So it says may require additional purchase. I do want to stress here that you are not purchasing anything. Your RefWorks subscription is covered through the NCU library. So once you add that, it will add an RCM tab to your Microsoft Word ribbon. And this is where you can launch your RefWorks account and view all of the sources that you've saved to RefWorks from your online dashboard directly within Microsoft Word. Now, if it is your first time using the application, you will be required to log in. So remember that your username is your NCU school email address, and then the password, if you're recently brand new to RefWorks, your password will be that alternate password that you've set up in your settings on RefWorks Online. So quick little tour on how this tool works. You do have your menu here. So in your RCM menu, your RefWorks Citation Manager, you can again set your citation style output to APA 7th. If you have multiple projects in the works, you will see the projects tab here and you can toggle between projects. So today I may be working on my dissertation project. Tomorrow I'm working on my EDU 5000 project, right? So you can kind of toggle between your references. This document and references tab is important. So sometimes you may add, let's just say a handful of references, and for whatever reason, they're not populating in your RefWorks Citation Manager. This is just a refresh button so that you can reestablish the connection between the RCM application and your RefWorks dashboard online to see all of the recent content that you've added. And then by default, the reference list, the bibliography is turned off. So you do want to make sure that this is turned on, toggled to blue, okay? And we're going to do a quick demo here, and I'll give myself a little bit of room, but as you're citing your sources, right, and typing out your research papers, what you can do is, based on the references that you've added for your project, so let's just say I want to use this particular author, I can go ahead and click on Cite This, and it will insert my in-text citation, and it will also generate my reference list. And I'll do this with maybe one more source just to kind of give you an idea. So we'll use Covey here. So you can start to see how my reference list is automatically being built out. It's alphabetizing my content. I've got my hanging indents. Of course, there's a couple of tweaks that we would have to make to get it to full APA style mode, right? So I'd want to change this to Times New Roman, font size 12. My reference page would be, on the very last page of my document, right? But it does give you a general foundation and formatting for your paper for APA style. A couple of little quirks that I do want to mention about this tool. RefWorks does not know when you're using a direct quote. And technically in APA, when you use direct quotes, you should also include the page or paragraph number from where that resource for that quote, for the resource where it came from. So that being said, let me use an example here. So we'll use Taylor. So if that's the case, you can always manually add the page number. The other thing that may happen if you're using RefWorks Citation Manager is that you may not use, I should say, a parenthetical citation, right? Where you put last name, comma, year in parentheses. Maybe you say according to XYZ author. So let's use a different author here. So what you can do in a case like this is you can say according to Stein, and then we can edit the in-text citation to remove that author from the parenthetical, from the parentheses. Now, for some of the changes that you will make in your parenthetical citations, as well as in your reference list, make sure you save all of those changes to the very end. You'll notice that when I added this in-text citation for Stein, that it kind of refreshed my entire document. And so I lost my page number that I added for my direct quote. So just make sure that any changes you save to the very end. That way it doesn't refresh your document when you're adding content. But you can kind of see that, again, it's adding my references in alphabetical order, hanging indent. Of course, my DOIs aren't fully hyperlinked, so you'll have to make a couple little changes there so it doesn't look strange. But overall, it gives you a foundation for APA formatting. So we're down to our last minute. So I want to check in with everyone, see if we have any questions, just to kind of round out all of this information that we have discussed. If you have any questions following today's session, please remember you have access to the RefWorks library guide. You have access to those additional trainings. You have access to our chat. So please feel free to give us a call in the library, email us, chat with us. And if you do have any hiccups along the way, you're always welcome to book a one-on-one as well. So I'll check in with Emily and turn it over to her and see if there are any questions before we wrap.
So I think that we had a great job of answering the questions during the session. And thank you so much for always providing the resource so that students know they can reach out to you, not just in the webinar forums as well too. So we really appreciate all of the questions that did come in. I know someone had mentioned, are we going to get a copy of this? Don't forget that it is recorded and we will post it in our CTL LibGuides webinar section. And I know that our librarian has a very hard stop and another meeting that starts right now. So I would just like to say thank you so much for your expertise and sharing your knowledge with us today. And until the next time, I'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.